As I have been a gamer for pretty much my whole life, I've always looked at video games as something more than just video games. Not only from a personal relationship with the video games I have owned, but as to what the video game is about, the type of story that the game is trying to tell you. Also asking, what type of issues is the game trying to tackle? What lessons can be learned? But also trying to find the artistic merit of a video game. This is leading to why I am making this video, because I feel that video games these days have very little artistic merit and value, and I don't mean that aesthetically. Make art, not video games. With video games now focusing more on graphics, they don't offer much without the graphics. Once you remove the Unreal Engine 5, the RTX and the ray tracing, you often find that there is nothing left to distract the mind from how bad the video game is, and I say that both in gameplay and the condition of the game, with many modern video games often making no sense artistically and making even less sense as a video game. It used to be that video games were made by artists, and when I say artists, I don't only mean people who draw and paint. Art is a very broad spectrum, and all mediums of art are important because they all make up a video game. As well, which is more important, is the artist's vision. If you are not going to make a video game or any body of work in the artist's vision, then you should rather not make it, because it removes the experience that the artist is trying to give you, which hurts the performance of the final product. There are many examples of video game franchises that lost direction when they lost their artistic direction, or in other words, when they lost the artist who created the said franchises or video game. I'm going to use some very good examples of video games that lost their artistic direction, and after mentioning them, I'll go into detail about what happened to all of them. I know there are a lot of video games out there, but I will choose the ones that I know. And I won't really make it in alphabetical order, but the franchises I want to talk about are Assassin's Creed, Need for Speed, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, Halo, Mass Effect, Test Drive Unlimited, and Saints Row. I will talk about the franchises in the order I mentioned them in. Assassin's Creed, a franchise that needs no introduction, but in the context of this video, Assassin's Creed was once an artistic masterpiece in writing, art style, and gameplay. With games like Assassin's Creed 1 and 2, they both were very solid artistic masterpieces, which these days is what people would consider to be responsible for why Assassin's Creed is such a beloved and respected franchise. But it wouldn't stay this way for long. As the franchise would go on, things wouldn't be all sunshine and rainbows, and the smooth sailing would face some troubled waters. When the person who is coined to have created Assassin's Creed would face some internal issues within Ubisoft is where the problems would start. Patrice Désilets is the creator of Assassin's Creed, and he took the game from nothing to one of the biggest franchises in the video game industry. He's essentially responsible for creating some of the best games in the Assassin's Creed franchise, like Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and Brotherhood. But thereafter, he left Ubisoft due to creative differences and, by the looks of it, some very personal disagreements. And this would mark the downfall of Assassin's Creed, because Patrice Désilets had artistic integrity and wanted to move on to something new. But Ubisoft wanted to milk Assassin's Creed, which was one of their biggest cash cows at that time, and Patrice Désilets didn't want to do that, so he left. To really mark Patrice Désilets' departure from Ubisoft, they pretty much scrapped his whole narrative entirely, with killing off Assassin's Creed's main protagonist, Desmond Miles, which they would later on live to regret, because it was a mistake both artistically and in a video game sense. The truth is, the Assassin's Creed franchise died after Assassin's Creed 3. Then thereafter, the franchise struggled to have a consistent direction. The art of the franchise would suffer too, because sure, the games did look good at times, but then they created one good character, and then they created two bad characters. Then they created a franchise-saving character that brought hope for the franchise, because the game had a good amount of artistic direction, with the setting being in Egypt, which is a very historically rich place, and it's not the hardest setting to depict. It's literally just sand, camels, and pyramids. But Ubisoft being Ubisoft, they didn't learn anything, and they made 2 worse characters, and then again they made 2 bad characters, and then again they made 2 even worse characters. Ubisoft keeps making the same mistakes. The worst part is that the reboot of Assassin's Creed is just big and flat, which is the biggest indication of the franchise losing its artistic direction, and it has ruined the franchise because the games lack everything. The art style is bad, the writing is horrible, the motion capture and animations are really bad, the voice acting is horrible, and this is why the franchise is in the state it's in. The games have gone in many different directions because the games were not being made in the vision of one person, and this is why the game stopped being art and just became ordinary video games. Need for Speed is a franchise that I have very fond memories of. It's one of those games that I grew up playing, and it has stuck with me ever since. I really got my feet in the water when Need for Speed started with its Underground 1 and 2. This was back when Need for Speed was going crazy with artistic value. The underground arc of Need for Speed is still seen as one of the best eras. The games had soul, passion, and attitude. Many would agree that it was the peak of Need for Speed, of where its story, art style, and gameplay were a heavy representation of the time period back then, following the over-the-top modifications with the neon-lit streets and extremely lowered cars that had underglow that reflected off the wet streets, and having extremely ridiculous wide body kits that almost removed the original identity of the car, splashed with immensely exotic and extravagant colors and liveries that look like the war paint of a warrior, a man about to go into battle to own the streets and run the city as the next top street racer. This would function as the artistic direction of Need for Speed, following that of Fast and Furious. Both franchises would exist side by side, shifting narratives as time would go on. Then the next artistic shift would be Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005, which would focus more on a story-driven narrative, featuring a live-action cast of actors which are overlaid by a CGI background, which is something that really stood out at the time and was welcomed by people. Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005 was a more dark and gritty game that had a more Western approach instead of the more JDM Japanese style of the underground games. They aimed to shake off the identity of the underground and now focused more on illegal street racing. The Need for Speed franchise was under the careful watch of Black Box, which was the main studio responsible for making NFS games. Under their watch, Need for Speed saw immense amounts of success. Though the franchise was very successful, the longer the franchise would go on, the more that would be stripped from it. Taking more and more creativity and freedom away from the games would lead to its slow but graceful creative bankruptcy. The last time that Need for Speed would still have its artistic footing is with Need for Speed Carbon, which would more or less be the last real black box NFS. And the truth is, the last good Need for Speed was Need for Speed Carbon. After Need for Speed Carbon, the franchise has pretty much fell off and was never as good as it used to be. With each new release thereafter, the games became less and less creative, and they lost all ambition. Even when they tried, it was never in the best way that they could have, almost to the point of where it doesn't feel like Need for Speed anymore. The loss of identity started with the loss of artistic direction. Everyone knows that the best games in the Need for Speed franchise are Need for Speed Underground 1, 2, Most Wanted 2005, and Carbon, which everyone would consider the peak of NFS. And after Black Box's closure, things haven't been the best for NFS, and recently it just got worse to where the NFS franchise got shut down and now sits in limbo, with nobody having a clue of what to do with the franchise. It's even more so clear with Black Box's games called Skate, of where they are trying to reboot the franchise, but they're facing so much backlash because it resembles nothing of what the old franchise stood for. It looks like something completely different to what Skate was. They pretty much removed the identity from the Skate games, and it looks like this game has very little artistic direction, and this is what has people really mad. Grand Theft Auto used to have so much artistic value, but now the franchise is struggling to bridge the gap between authenticity and what one would consider entertainment. Grand Theft Auto never used to rely on insane graphics and over-the-top gameplay. It used to be a very grounded franchise, and since Rockstar hasn't released that many new GTA games on the next generations of consoles, they had to rely on more artistic means of creating video games, with Grand Theft Auto spending most of its lifespan on PS1 and 2. The franchise would only have 2 games on 7th gen consoles and 1 game on 8th and 9th gen consoles, with the exception being the Definitive Edition. But what I'm saying is that the games had to rely on a lot more than just graphics, because back in the day they didn't have much of the things we have today. Grand Theft Auto games used to be masterpieces in how they told their stories and how they depicted their characters as real people. They used to have really good writing, not to mention the gameplay as well as the world of GTA, functioning as its own universe, one that is filled to the brim with artistic merit of the world of GTA, having so much detail in it and everything in the games feeling handcrafted by a team of passionate people. But it looks like Grand Theft Auto went really hard in the wrong direction of not really following art, but more so following trends and influences that are okay for a video game, but that don't follow the legacy of Grand Theft Auto games, with GTA 5 in my opinion being one of the weakest GTA games in the franchise. The last real artistic GTA game was GTA 4. The game had a really great story and had really good artistic direction, and you could feel it when you play the game. Even the gameplay was artistic. A lot of people complained about the gameplay, but I believe the gameplay was the best part. GTA 4 is living art. Everything is heavy and throws its weight around, just how it would feel like in real life. The driving in the game is a good example of what motion capture driving would feel like. The cars are heavy and at many times can be considered unresponsive if you drive too fast and don't brake at the right time. GTA 4 makes you play carefully because it feels like you're playing a game as a real person and not just a video game character. It has been over 10 years since we got GTA 5, and over all this time, the identity and artistic direction of Grand Theft Auto should have changed tremendously. And since we have no idea in which direction Grand Theft Auto 6 will be going in artistically, a lot of people just assume that it will be GTA 5 2.0. A game that will be even more crazy than GTA 5, and everyone is waiting to see what GTA 6 will be like, but a good amount of people are skeptical, and myself included, because I feel that Grand Theft Auto is not art anymore, it's just an over-the-top video game now. Call of Duty is a game that I've played many times and have owned a good amount of the Call of Duty games. For a long time the franchise was solid with how good the games were. They were simplistic but had a certain artistic appeal. The Call of Duty franchise started out with old war games, pretty much like World War 1 and 2, and for a good amount of time the franchise was pretty solid in its identity and artistic direction. It would be with Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare where the franchise would become bigger than it's ever been, with the game not only having a great story and gameplay, but it being a heavy representation of being a military simulator. It played like an action movie and performed like a theatrical play, not to mention the online multiplayer, a relic of a time where you had the freedom of where online lobbies were like the wild wild west, where many viral catchphrases would be conceived and would still be echoed in lobbies by the fans of Call of Duty even up to this day. The first Call of Duty Modern Warfare games became a hit. They were simple, but the community did the rest. Because with the simplicity, a lot of people made their own fun and basically made the game their own. I myself have many hours in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and 3. The lobbies were so much fun and the people were really cool too. A time when everyone had a sense of humor and didn't take everything personally. The old Call of Duty Modern Warfare games were not baby-proofed, and that's how we liked it so much. But the Modern Warfare era of the Call of Duty franchise has to be the peak of Call of Duty. And I say that in every aspect because Call of Duty never used to hold back. The Modern Warfare games really spoke about a lot of serious issues in the military and what soldiers have to go through. They had great stories with great characters that all felt real. You felt an emotional connection with them. There are so many hectic moments in the Modern Warfare games, and there is one mission in particular that you can skip because it's a scene of where there is a mass shooting, but you play as the group who did the mass shooting. Though it is a hectic mission, very few games ever had the guts to do this, and the fact that it got greenlit is crazy. Call of Duty had become iconic with their Modern Warfare arc, and many people would say it is the peak of Call of Duty. With many great stories, characters, and gameplay, they had the artistic direction, but they would shift into their next big thing, which would be the Black Ops arc. The Black Ops games would serve to be a little bit more story oriented than the Modern Warfare games, having more artistic range than Modern Warfare, but Black Ops would serve to be the range of Call of Duty, of where they would struggle to create outside of that. As Modern Warfare ended, Black Ops would serve to be more of the franchise moving forward, with it still having a good art direction. I never really played Black Ops 1, but I played the heck out of Black Ops 2, and artistically it was a really great game. It tried to do the whole futuristic thing, and it did it pretty well, but I would say that Modern Warfare just did it better. Modern Warfare had less artistic range, but yet it still managed to tell a better story. I enjoyed Black Ops 2 mainly for its online, but I didn't like the story very much, and I didn't find it very replayable. But hey, that's just my opinion. After Black Ops 2, the franchise would go all over the place, making many different games that I played only a few times. I will admit that the last Call of Duty game I bought was on PS3, and that was Call of Duty Ghost. I never got to finish the game because the game was second hand and the CD was scratched, so I could only play up until a certain point and then the game stopped working. It was a decent game though. I liked the art style and gameplay, but I never got to enjoy it unfortunately, and thereafter is where I fell off with Call of Duty. I didn't own an 8th gen console and I didn't have internet at the time, so I couldn't play any of the new games back then. I played Advanced Warfare here and there, but I didn't like it. The game tried very hard to be futuristic, but it was just a bit too complicated for my liking. To fast forward to the point I'm trying to get at, Call of Duty struggled with its identity for a good amount of time, to the point of where they were literally just guessing what to make. The games didn't feel like artistic depictions about war anymore. They had officially just become like any other video game. Call of Duty has been doing a yearly release schedule since the beginning, and it might just be what is hurting their creativity, because instead of making something meaningful, they have to rush and get something out as soon as possible. And the current state of Call of Duty is very telling to which direction the franchise is going in. As of recently, a lot of people have not been happy with the live service direction, going from it being a small part of the game to it being literally what the game is about. Call of Duty has officially lost its identity, and Call of Duty Warzone, which is a free-to-play battle royale, would be the very blatant shift, to where now Warzone is the blueprint and everything else is just thrown in. Zero artistic direction, zero love or passion, and the gameplay can be heavily put to question. Call of Duty tried to reboot by taking things back to the Modern Warfare era, which brought a bit of hope, since Modern Warfare was their peak, but it did very little to add anything artistic to the franchise. And then they would remake all the Modern Warfares, and I bought one of them. It has zero artistic direction and it feels boring to play. It is a very live service heavy game, and the only incentive for a lot of people is the overpriced battle pass and the numerous amount of ridiculous skin packs that you can buy, which most of them are not even related to Call of Duty. They add celebrities and now even cartoon characters, with Call of Duty looking more like Fortnite. I made a video about this, and now everyone is trying to make the next Fortnite, and this is very clear. The straw that broke the camel's back was Beavis and Butthead. The new COD games don't really have a singular identity like they used to. They all kind of just exist in the same space now, and are not really that different from each other. Call of Duty has been getting an insane amount of backlash for what they've been doing lately. The skins they have been adding to the games have really disrespected the fan base, and most of them have left. Call of Duty has Black Ops 7 in development, and people don't care. I left the franchise a while ago, and I'm not sure that them just making another game will fix all the problems. It is much bigger than that. They need to fix the artistic problem before they start making a new game, and it appears that they haven't learned anything. The Call of Duty franchise has lost its artistic direction, but they are still making games, which doesn't give them much value. It's like when a currency is low, printing more money will not change the currency, it will only give the currency less value. Halo. I will admit that I'm not the most informed person about Halo, and I haven't had the most experience with the franchise because for most of the time it was an Xbox exclusive, and I've never owned an Xbox and spent most of my time on PlayStation and PC. But I'm no stranger to how much the Halo and Xbox fan base have voiced their unhappiness with the direction of the Halo franchise, going from a Xbox flagship franchise to now a faded memory of a time when things were better. Halo has legitimately fallen off and fallen off hard, to having a long line of great video games now floating around in obscurity, with its main developer being bought by Sony. Halo doesn't make any sense as a franchise anymore, and it makes even less sense as a video game, and it is essentially artistically dead. Halo used to be a very good showcase of Xbox's power and development, with each Halo game getting more and more advanced, and the lore of the franchise together with the fan base growing would really push Halo to new heights, making Halo's main protagonist Master Chief one of the most legendary video game characters of all time, going from zero to hero, with Master Chief being a faceless protagonist and a person of few words. The only thing that would flow the most is the artistry of the Halo universe. Halo is a lot bigger than people think. As I said, it's its own universe, filled with not just video games, but novels, graphic novels, comic books, short films, animated films, feature films, and more. And yet with all of that, where is the franchise now, you ask? It's pretty much dead, with Halo Infinite being the final nail in the coffin, and with the Halo franchise showing no signs of making a comeback. It's anyone's guess as to why Halo is dead. One could blame Microsoft for the mismanagement of the Halo franchise. One could also blame 343 Studios for not giving the Halo fanbase what they wanted. But I'm no Halo expert, so my opinion doesn't bear the most weight, or take anything away from what Halo has achieved. Mass Effect. I was blown away the first time I played a Mass Effect game. It was on a gaming laptop, and this was back when I was a kid. I didn't own the laptop, so it was the first time I'd ever seen such high graphics. Then fast forward to a while later, and I would own Mass Effect 3 on PS3. Mass Effect is a very heavily artistically directed game. It has a massive universe that is filled with many iconic characters. Mass Effect functions more as the Halo for everyone, and I mean that just as an example. The games are very different in nature, but Mass Effect started out pretty strong. It's not a very big franchise, but it's carved out its own fan base. It started life on the 7th gen consoles, which gave it a really good lifespan. As far as I've seen, I haven't heard anyone say anything bad about Mass Effect. It is a rather good third-person shooter. Mass Effect is not a very big franchise. It only has about 4 games in total, but by the 3rd game, they had made some really bad artistic decisions and essentially killed the franchise. It was almost like what happened with Assassin's Creed 3, of where they killed off the main protagonist, but with Mass Effect 3, the ending basically killed everyone, to my understanding. People apparently hated the ending so much that BioWare had to make a new ending to the game. Even with BioWare trying to do damage control, it wouldn't serve to do much because they chose to reboot the franchise anyway. And the reboot has to be one of the worst games I've ever played. Mass Effect Andromeda has nothing. It has absolutely nothing. It has to be one of the worst artistic directions out of any game I've ever played. It was so bad that I just stopped playing it. The characters had no depth and they all looked the same. It was nice to be in the Mass Effect universe again, but all Mass Effect Andromeda is a Mass Effect cosplay. No characters from old games, no nothing. So the game has no artistic value at all. It was a really sad way to end a franchise that I had grown to like, and have it ruined in such a way really did hurt after all the time I spent playing the old games. The legacy they tried to create failed really badly. Test Drive Unlimited. Test Drive Unlimited used to be a very valued and respected franchise, not for being perfect, but for being the experience that the game gives you. There are not that many games that simulate life so much to the point of where you grow a platonic relationship with the game. Another good example is Grand Theft Auto Online, of making all your dreams come true to the point of where you feel like you have made a real accomplishment in life just by playing the game. This would be the same case with Test Drive Unlimited. The Test Drive franchise actually spans a long list of games, but their most successful claim to fame is the Test Drive Unlimited games. They were masterpieces of art and changed the way people would play open world racing games. One could coin them for pretty much inventing the festival racing genre because they created the legacy for it. The real art from Test Drive Unlimited comes from what the game does rather than what it looks like. It's not a video game, it's an experience. If you ever want a good example of what freedom feels like, then Test Drive Unlimited 1 and 2 are the perfect examples. And even though story modes in car games were not the best at the time, both games still managed to have offline story modes that were pretty good. The games had heart. They had soul, passion, love and care. The artistic direction would be very successful for the first and the second game, but things would go south later because the studio that made Test Drive Unlimited 1 and 2 would get shut down, marking the end of Test Drive Unlimited. The Test Drive Unlimited franchise would disappear for over a decade and then would resurface in the form of a reboot called Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. The game would shift to be very different from the Test Drive Unlimited games that had come before. I ironically predicted the downfall of this game, stating that it had nothing to do with TDU 1 and 2 and how this was exactly what was wrong with the game. Gone are the big maps, the houses you can buy, the social aspects that were the building blocks of the old Test Drive Unlimited games. Gone is the detail, gone is the passion, and gone is the art direction. And so did the hype for TDUSC. When the game launched, everyone hated it, and to this day, it is seen as a huge failure. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown didn't have an offline story mode, it didn't have an expansive map, it didn't have a cast full of good characters. You couldn't buy houses like in the first two games. Instead, the housing system was reduced to a hotel room. Even with the car list in the game lacking an actual car list, it seemed just to be sports and exotic cars only. The game was Test Drive Unlimited in name only, but when you play it, it feels like something completely different. It feels and looks almost like an indie game, which really clashes with the high-class luxurious style of the first two games. Gone are all the features that made us love TDU 1 and 2 in the first place. So what is TDU without its artistic direction? The truth is, it's just like any other ordinary game out there. Saints Row. Saints Row used to be a very respected franchise. It used to be Grand Theft Auto's biggest competition because it stuck to what made it popular. Saints Row started out its life as a gangster game, one that was well rooted in its aesthetic and humble in its artistic direction. Saints Row was a breath of fresh air for a lot of people who wanted something different from Grand Theft Auto. The Saints Row franchise has a very dedicated fan base, and even though Saints Row never really sold better than GTA, the fan base supported every game they made. The Saints Row trilogy would serve to be where the franchise would be the most successful, both financially and artistically. The best part is that the sales were growing and the franchise was picking up steam. So from Saints Row to Saints Row the Third, things were looking really good. It would be until Saints Row 4 that the franchise would do a huge artistic shift, and to be honest, it wasn't very well received. Saints Row games have always been rather over the top. The only difference is that it used to focus very heavily on the characters, the story and gameplay. Also the artistic direction, because the games did shift a bit from the first game to the third game, but Saints Row 4 was the straw that broke the camel's back. Going from a game about gangsters to shifting to being a game about aliens and superpowers really didn't gain the favor of the fan base, who just wanted a grounded gangster game. The other issue is, Saints Row 4 didn't add much to the game, and artistically, it was pretty much still Saints Row 3, but just with a bunch of added stuff that didn't really serve to make the game any better. After Saints Row 4, the franchise would struggle with its identity, with the games not getting nearly as many sales as they used to, thinking that all people wanted was just more over the top. The artistic direction would leave the franchise entirely, with Saints Row now even becoming a live server style hero shooter at one point. And interestingly enough, I have no idea why they made Agents of Mayhem, because the game is a single player game, and yet it looks like Fortnite and plays like Overwatch. Yet the game apparently has no multiplayer at all, which makes no sense because it looks like a game that would be fun to play with friends, which makes a lot of sense as to why Agents of Mayhem has to be the worst selling of all the Saints Row games. They tried to reboot Saints Row in 2022, which really had a lot of people happy, but there were many signs that there were cracks showing in the development of the game that would hurt what the game is supposed to be, and unfortunately, the biggest problem with the game was its artistic direction. From the first trailer of Saints Row 2022, people were not happy with the direction that it looked like they were going on, from a game about gangsters to a game about a bunch of college and university students, doesn't really relate to the legacy of Saints Row, and the other problem is, it took them so long to do something new. They followed the same formula for too long that stopped working back in the 4th game, and now when they finally do something different, they made the same mistakes like they did with the Agents of Mayhem. Saints Row 2022 essentially killed the franchise, and it even killed the studio that created Saints Row. Saints Row 2022 makes no sense as a video game, and it makes even less sense artistically. I watched a video about the ideas they had for Saints Row 2022, and it's crazy how much was actually removed from the game before it was launched. Essentially, what they did is they removed everything Saints Row related from a Saints Row game, and the sad part is that it could have been so much more. Instead of doing what worked in the old games, they tried to experiment with a whole new bunch of stuff that people don't know what to do with, because the game doesn't represent anything Saints Row related. I've spoken about a lot of video games, and the point of this video is that video games are art and need to be treated so. As soon as you remove the art, it stops becoming a video game. Movies and other media are made for money, but everyone understands that acting in a movie is what you need a good actor to do, because if you don't get the right actors, no matter how big the budget, no matter how good the production, no matter how good the marketing is, it won't make any money if the art is not present in the body of work. And making something that only exists to make money but is devoid of any artistic direction will not make money, because without the art, it won't appeal to people, so nobody will interact with it. And with that, this is the Chilly Man signing off. Thank everyone for watching. Peace out.